Hey guys, I was planning on making a longer, more serious video, but with everyone being a little bit sick lately, I sound even more tragic than usual. When I get excited, I start to squeak and sneeze. Anyway, so let me instead take this opportunity to show you a little bit of what I've been working on lately. I've been writing Goose, my latest book, for a while now. I started it about 3 years ago. There are parts in it that I've taken from stories written decades ago. And every time I interrupt my life with a new crazy job or where I change as a person over time, then I look back and it's not a book I want to be writing anymore. I want to write a book with a different tone, either more serious or something happens and I want it to be more funny, more adventurous, or more philosophical. So I start, not so much all over again, but I rearrange the chapters a little bit and add to it. And add to it. As a basic premise, it's a story about paper pagans, the people who, working for a god of stories, pursue books through history. That is always the people I'm writing about. Main character being Paper Kay, and her entourage of misfits and people she's picked up from various chapters of history or stories along the way. The book was always going to be in 3 major parts. The first one spanning over about 10 years, with origin stories and telling a little bit about the characters and how they came to be what they are. The very last part, the third part, was always going to be very short, spanning only about a weekend, and it's a more philosophical conversation of what's been going on, a little bit of closure between Paper and another character. And then the middle one was supposed to be short stories that show what these people are really about. You hear what they do, why they do it in the first part, and I wanted to show in the second part everything that we've been talking about. These short stories would be about 20, some very short and some maybe 50 pages long. And I always knew that I wanted the last one to be called Agora. I knew what I wanted it to be about, but I never wrote it, or forced it. I knew that when time comes, the story is going to come on its own. I designed the story to spiral inwards. Kay and a friend of hers, an orc, would be spiraling inwards looking for the ruins of the Agora. And the story of Agora would be that a lady arrived at a region. There's a little bit of a magic realism in it, and built this beautiful mosaic in the middle of nowhere. She wanted people of the local regions to come and meet here and trade, and slowly and surely build up first a town, and then a city, and then an entire civilization. This was a really long time ago. So in a land of magic and a lot of war, Agora would be source of several bad things happening, things that still resonated through the region. That was one side of the story. Another side of the story, I wanted to incorporate a tale that I've never used but wrote in my own language about a German soldier stationed in a French village who, in a sense, feels responsible for the village, and when a crime happens, he wants to solve it. So I taken that element and put it in the story about Agora, when Kay and Orc come upon a fishing village and there's been a crime, and because they're neutral and because they're skilled, people ask them to find out what happened. And they do, they find out what happened, and they find that there was an element of supernatural darkness spawning from the Agora, and they look for the ruins and they cleanse it. But nothing changes when they come back. The crime has still occurred for different reasons. The orc Kay travels with, he is a warlord, and he has been spirited away by her on the eve of battle. He takes 20 days away from battle to another story, so the time doesn't really move when he's away for him, to find out whether or not his decisions could have been avoided. He knows he's going to go to war, he knows he's going to lose it. The pagans know that he's going to lose it, and they have stepped aside. They don't want to help him because they don't believe that he's doing the right thing. So the cards have already been laid on the table, and there's nothing can be done to change it. But he wants to find out whether or not he could have done it differently. So he wants to travel back in time in this particular region, find what happened with the Agora, find out what happened with the woman who built it, and see if he removes it entirely from history, people would have a choice. Kay knows that it's not going to happen, but she lets him do it anyway, so that he could go down in the battle with the sense that these things have been written for him long ago. That's the parts that I've already set to write. But then, this is where a little bit of a side story comes in that has spread all over the main story so much it actually became the main plot. I wanted to learn how to use Photoshop to draw a comic. For all the techniques I've ever used, this was the one I never used before. And I started practicing by copying an itinerary I once drew in watercolor for a river that I like to walk. In this itinerary, Paper is acting as a cartographer in a sense that she doesn't measure distances and places in relation to the main road, but she draws a road and adds interesting things that she meets along the way for future generations of explorers. And her friends get the idea that they could cash in their adventure tokens and the boons that they have from their king by employing people who would travel through stories uncharted and draw similar itineraries. They designed something called the March of 1,000 Days, in which adventurers would be invited to spend 1,000 days roaming about and charting paths and shorelines and mountain and foothills and villages. The travelers are supposed to venture off the road to mark interesting things within the premises. They are supposed to mark the farms with friendly people, or farms where help is needed, or villages which are friendly, villages that are not friendly. But in this Tovelyn's journal, the pages are drawn extremely dark and the road is drawn extremely bright and wide. Even though when the Orc and Kay travel it's just a normal footpath in the forest. But it shows that Tovelyn was not accustomed, even though this was a requirement. He, or she, as it turns out, the gender is not known, was not accustomed to exploring and enjoying these adventures. So the road seemed like the only thing he wanted to walk. He didn't want to come off. And in the back, you can see that just making camps and finding firewood and trying to keep dry were main preoccupations. He didn't care about people or folk songs that he should be writing down, or strange animals he should be cataloging and sketching ruins and sketching castles and old dragon bones. So they follow the road to the shoreline and through the islands, and that's where they come upon a village where the crime happened. But the more they travel, they find that people just simply don't remember a person with that name or with that token coming through. They do remember somebody came, but they don't really remember who it was. They don't remember anything about this person. In the charter that the adventurers were supposed to sign in the beginning, there was just the name, the age, which doesn't really say anything because some ages of people were very high. That didn't mean it was very old people. It just meant that they may be dwarves or elves or something. And they took down the name of the town they originated from, the destination they chose to travel, and then the dates, as the notes were supposed to return to the station every week or so. Paper's lieutenant goes to the town of Took, where Tovelyn was supposed to originate from, to find out about this person, because nobody seems to remember anything. And he checks all the places where you may want to look for a person, like schools and religious institutions and law stations, like police stations, or, in our days you would want to try with a cab station or postman or something. Nothing. He checks the brothels, he checks the local pubs, nothing. There's just no memory of this person. And Paper starts to notice that there is an enormous amount of mentions of the tree of ginkgo. Ginkgo biloba, of course, being a tree, the extract of which helps you with memory. And because they can't find Tovelyn, and the memory of him or her is fading, gradually Paper figures out that it was being erased from memory. It was just fading away, and he or she knew what was happening, or sensed it, and that's why they desperately try to stop the memory to melt away, and failed. Tovelyn is never found, and were it not for the journal that he or she left behind, it would never be even remembered remotely. Anyway, so that is the story that I want to finish with. This tragic tale of a person who tried to sketch things, tried to find things of interest, but for whatever reason they decided to take on the 1,000-day march. It didn't work out. They weren't happy. They didn't know what to do with it. They didn't feel so much a knight errant walking into a town and people would go, "Oh, look, someone powerful and brave and intelligent and educated walked in." It wasn't the fame that was supposed to be spread that he carried, or she. It was just he or she. They were a beggar, they were a vagrant, like a small wet dog, just looking for shelter, desperate for tuning into this one sense of adventure everyone talks about, and they just could never understand and never found.